Thank you, Johnny. So I'm here to tell you a bit about the YOPP Data Portal and how it can contribute to the legacy of YOPP. So I have a number of colleagues on this, including Johanna, that you have already met earlier in presentations. So we will try to go through the YOPP Data Portal and some of the history behind it and how it can move onwards. Thank you. So talking about legacies. So YOPP is a legacy of the IPY activity. And I find this quite interesting. I had a go on the going back in my archive of old events, and I found out that I met Siri Joda, not in here now, but also a data champion of YOPP, during an IPY meeting in Cambridge in 2006. And during that meeting, we had a lot of discussions on how to improve the data exchange in the Arctic regions. It's outlined in the paper or the report that you see here, a copy of. And we built now the YOPP Data Portal on the same basic principles as we used in the IPY Data and Information System, the IPY DIS. And basically, during that meeting in Cambridge in 2006, we discussed about what do we need to make a distributed data management work in practice. We need to discuss granularity of data. We need to discuss terminology and semantics, how we document our data. And we need to discuss the application of interoperability protocols. Also, how do we make systems talk together? So this is basically the same challenges as we have today. And I will come a bit back to that later on. So going back to the IPY DIS implementation, what we have inherited in YOPP from the IPY approach is the concept of metadata. Prior to IPY, adopted scientists knew the concept of metadata. During IPY, most of the science community came to know the concept of metadata, data about data. How do you describe your information? We also experienced the concept of distributed data management in a larger context beyond the operational communities. WMO has done this for a long time, but now we took it into the research communities as well. So we had a network of data centers collaborating. We had a linkage between the research communities and the operational communities through the linking of research data with WMO Information System. I will also come a bit back to that later. And we had a strong focus on the linkage of research and operational data and activities in the polar regions. And this is exactly what we do in YOPP as well. It's talking a bit about metadata again, because I think this can't be stressed enough during presentations and also when we meet. There are different types of metadata. So metadata is not only one thing. We talk about discovery metadata, the type of information that we exchange between the data centers, the type of information that we ingest into a catalog that enables you to find the relevant data that you can access and use for something specific. So this is the type of metadata that most scientists came to know during IPY. However, there are also other types of metadata. You have used metadata, and you have site metadata, or the information that you need in order to understand observational sites, for example. So during YOPP now, I think we are in a position where we have much better understanding of the different types of metadata. We have actively started to use in a larger community and a consistent manner use metadata through the implementation of MODFs, MMDFs using NetCDF CF. We are also having the WIGOS metadata, so the WMO Integrated Global Observing System, where we can describe observation facilities. So that's actually another level of use metadata for the data set. So it's not only the pure content of a data set, but it's also the facility that you used in order to achieve or generate the data. So if you want to know more about metadata or discuss metadata later, please come and chat with me afterwards. I would also like to emphasize that a year ago, WMO got a new unified data policy. And I won't go into the details of the unified data policy of WMO, but one important element in it, first of all, it integrates it supersedes 3 different data policies earlier in WMO. So now WMO only has 1 data policy. But most important, it expands the scope for the data exchange in WMO. So now it's not only the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, but it's the member states. Also, the members of WMO are states, nations. And now the WMO data policy affects all aspects of the nation's data management perspective, including research data. So it's an inclusive data policy, as opposed to earlier, where it was focused on part of the community. And this is important for activities like IPY, for YOPP, etc. And of course, it continues the long-lasting tradition of WMO for free and open exchange of data. I will skip a bit quick through this, but this is also an element from the unified data policy of WMO. There are different aspects of the data policy, and what is important in the data policy is what you use it for as well. And you use it for the requirements and gap analysis, and you have material that tell you how to actually, guidance material on how to follow the data policy. And that's not part of the policy in itself, but it's the guidance material around it, like the effort taken by the SiteMap people in YOPP in order to have a clear description of the data sets that are exchanged. So the data portal in itself, the purpose is to provide an overview of the data sets that are relevant to YOPP. And this implies that we have an open data space. And this is contrary to many other contexts where you meet data, where you have a closed data space where you can select a specific temperature or a parameter or something like that and plot it against a number of sites, etc. In YOPP, we don't know which type of data that is being provided to the system. We have a bit of more knowledge about the SiteMap data. So the difference between YOPP as such is an open data space. The SiteMap is a closed data space where we can control the data that we have in it. And when we have control and a closed data space, we can provide services on top of the data. We would also like to provide access to data sets wherever possible. We focus on both the real-time data and archived data. And there is a strong focus of the interaction with WMO Information System, including the existing version of the real-time exchange, the WMO GTS. And there is a strong focus on integration with SAON, IASC, SCADN activities that I will also come back to later. So for the YOPP data portal, we do data discovery. So this is the open data space that I tell you about. We do harvest. I won't go into the details about this, but we harvest information from a number of sites. We do provide access to the data. So if the discovery metadata provided by the data centers contributing contain relevant information, so we can access directly the data, and we know how to access the data, then we can build services on top of it. And we also do data visualization if it's possible. And the best example of that is actually the YOPP SiteMap data. So the illustration on the right-hand side here is just an overview of the various components that we have in the data portal, where we have harvesting mechanisms, we have transformation mechanisms, visualization services, etc. So the approach is a physically distributed system where there is a central node that harvests information from a number of data centers. We do not necessarily store data in the central node, but we have data centers hosting the data. We set up a system actually collecting information from the contributing data centers. And we always consider the contributing data center as the authoritative source for the information about the data. For this to work in practice, we need to have standardization beyond the level of discovery metadata. We also need to have standardization at the level of datasets when we exchange the datasets, if we would like to have a full integration of services. So I won't go into the detail on the existing functionality. There is something that we haven't used too much yet, but there is this possibility of adding editorial content, guidance, etc., more on the specifics of the tools, toolkits, etc., that are available. And one thing we have discussed during this meeting has been to emphasize the information about the YOPP, also the MDF toolkit, also the merged data files toolkit. So if you want to use the system in order to find information, this is just a brief information on how to address it. It's also available as a drop-down menu in the search interface. The search area is composed of 3 columns, which add up to an and or an inclusive search. So if you select specific elements of the search interface, could be the free text search, could be the date search, could be the spatial search, or one of the grouping or facets that are available, those will be included into one specific search. If you don't know anything about the facets or the groups that are available here, use the free text search. And the free text search defaults to showing the results for all of these words that you put into the search interface. So here it's just an example. If you want to know which data are available from the GTS system that contains SynOp observations, you put in SynOp and GTS, push search, and then you get a list of the stations available. And this is how it looks. Currently, we have a number of services here. You can add information to a basket. You can download it. You can actually show extended information about the data sets. You can visualize the time series. You can have a transformation of the data from NetCDF to a comma-separated file if you want that. Or you can actually export the metadata if you need that. Currently, we have the same issue in the data portal as we have with the sitemap data to a certain extent. There are some errors that XArray in Python doesn't like, so we have to re-implement some of the data sets before we continue with the visualization services, etc. for this. When it comes to the integration with WMO Information System, currently this is a one-way. We do extract information from WMO GTS and puts it into the data portal. And that's, I also put up here the comment that we have the challenge with the XArray, and that's why we have re-implemented the data extraction. So there will be a full new data extraction available now in a couple of weeks, I hope. It's being tested operationally currently. If you want information about the YOPP sitemap data, just put YOPP sitemap into the search interface. You will get the results for the YOPP sitemap data, and then you can further refine the elements that you would like to look for. However, currently there are no observations in the system because that's an ongoing process, so that will come in the future. So the benefits of standardization of data documentation is most clearly identified in this context from the YOPP sitemap data, where the tools that Johanna has been developing, are under development to support science. And the reason why we can do tools like this is that we have a closed data space. Everybody that delivers data in a specific form, a specific format, using the same sort of terminology, etc., when they send it in. And just some quick screenshots from Johanna here, so I will skip fast by them because she's shown them already. So these are the possibilities that we can, in the future, not only serve as Jupyter notebooks as Johanna does today, but we can integrate these services as on-the-fly services in the portal. So it's easier to access for people without having to run the Jupyter notebooks if you like to. So the key element here, and the reason why we could do this, is that we had an acceptance from the community to choose NetCDF, CF, in order to document the data. So this is not controversial in the numerical modeling community, but it's somewhat controversial in the observational community. So this is a huge benefit that we've been able to make the observational data also available in the same format. And this means that, contrary to the illustration I had at the beginning of the presentation, we have now added another element. So we have the protocols at the top, we have the semantics, we have the granularity of the data that are useful, because YOPP sitemap is also about choosing the granularity when you generate your files. But we have now also added containers, so the containers that you put data into. So then we have a better sort of infrastructure to further develop these efforts of the sitemap on. I would like to add some things about NetCDF, because quite often I hear that NetCDF is only for gridded data. It's only the modeling community using NetCDF. But the purpose of NetCDF is much wider than only gridded data, than only the numerical modeling data. And this is now also acknowledged by other communities. So NetCDF CF is actually an OGC standard, so it's part of the suite that OGC is promoting. And more important, we got a new task team within WMO, the task team on CF, NetCDF, and the purpose of that team is basically to identify profiles of CF, NetCDF to be used within WMO. And one of those profiles could be the YOPP sitemap, the MODFs, for example. That could be an example of something that we could promote to become one of the supported profiles of the WMO implementation of NetCDF. And I won't go into details. If you have questions about CF, NetCDF, please come and talk with me afterwards if you like to. We do also have machine interfaces in the portal. We haven't advocated them much because this is an effort we've done much in collaboration with the WIS 2.0 team in WMO. And we had some people attending the OSGeo conference this week in Greece as well. So we're working on an updated software component, which will also be part of the WIS 2.0 in a box. That allows you to use a number of machine endpoints that you can integrate into your Python software, your R software, or your whatever C or Fortran if you use that, where you have direct access to the full content of the catalog. So if we haven't announced it fully, but if you want to test this, please tell us and we will give you the endpoints. I did also mention the Arctic data system. I will go a bit brief or quick through this, but this is on the right-hand side, you have an illustration from an ongoing effort under the joint SEAN and IASC Arctic Data Committee, where we try to map out the polar data system, because it's now also, it started in the SEAN community, but now it's part a joint activity with SCADM, in order to find out which data centers have polar data, whether it's in Antarctica or in the Arctic. And you can see PPP deep in this illustration. But this is an ongoing effort, and we try to navigate through all the different systems and frameworks that are available in order to increase the availability of systems. But this will be an open data space, so there is no uniform way of presenting data in this system. Next steps. We want to add more documentation and guidance around the MDF toolkit in the YOPP Data Portal. We want to add, at a certain point, quick links to specific subsets of data and web services, going from the open data space to a closed data space, so targeting specific use cases in the community. We are going to evaluate web services, also integration of web services in the portal around the MDF checker and toolkit, similar to what we've done for the CF checker and the ACDD checker. And we will continue to focus on the proper integration with WIS 2.0, and in particular, bridging between the operational and research communities in this context. We will try to advocate MDFs, also the MODFs, MMDFs, towards the task team on NetCDF, and clean up some of the data sets that we already had. I don't know if you noticed, but in one of the illustrations, there are some YOPP sitemap data in the Indian Ocean, for example. I think is erroneous. So we need to clean up some of the content in the system. And of course, we have to focus on the ingestion of the observations in the system, but that's, I trust that that will come quite soon now. So what we try to do is the small steps approach. So not a giant leap, but the small steps approach building on what we started during IPY. And I doubt, Siri Joda, that you thought we would still be discussing the same issues today as we did in 2006 in Cambridge when we planned the data management for the IPY, but that's reality and that's how life is, and that's why we've chosen this small steps approach. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Øystein, for that great overview of what's been happening. Are there any questions?
Øystein, that's so great. I mean, I know we've been working together, but to see this like formally show all the work you've been doing, and I want to thank Met Norway because this is really making an enormous difference, I think, in what we're going to be able to do with research. So. But I would like to add to my list of all the annoying questions I keep asking. And this is, we've been hearing a lot from the services community, and I am a person who started off like, oh, NetCDF, we don't need this because we don't have gridded data, it's too difficult. One thing that I think is going to be a really important part of the tool is the data extraction for people who don't handle deep NetCDF, and like a school teacher in a remote village who wants to just have her students be able to look at the temperatures and compare them to temperatures someplace else. And so if you had an extractor, maybe you already do, where you have a web service where you could put a start and end time and variables and a location and have it, give it to you in just a very simple text format, that would be great.
So what we have today is not necessarily targeting the user that you mentioned here, but we do have the ability already in the portal to convert to a comma-separated file. So select the variables you want, the time period, the station, and get a comma-separated file. But in order to address the community you ask for, I think we need a more dedicated interface that is easier, simpler to use for them, because then we need to go for this closed data space, I think. But it's a good idea.
Øystein, I have been pestering people about metadata for about 30 years as a user, but I admit to not so far being a fan of discovery metadata, because I find that the systems that use it give me either too few responses or too many. I went looking for radio sound data from Mosaic a couple months ago, and I think I got 2 hits, and they weren't what I knew I was looking for, or I could get, 20,000 hits, which the grant is going to be over by the time I figure out where it is. Is there any way to either improve the back end of the system so that a user who knows there's something out there she needs can find it, or to train the users on, give them suggestions on how to get a tractable, helpful number of responses?
Thank you. I totally agree. And I think that we had a data team meeting in Oslo some years ago. And I think it was one of the comments from Akhil that we actually, this is about social science as well, as having the communication in the community. Because if you want a system to work around discovery metadata, because discovery metadata is like the index card in a library. And if people, the data providers, do not document according to the standard, the people searching for data won't find the content. So data management is a collaboration between data providers and data consumers. And the data centers or the data managers are in between. But this is why we always advocate for standardization of using terminology, etc., so that it's possible to properly sort the results that you ask for. We do know there are challenges in the sorting mechanisms, and this is also something that we continuously work on. So if you discover that there are results that are in there that are not properly ranked in the sorting results, please tell us, because then we can look. Sometimes it's in the underlying data that we have available, but sometimes it's in the ranking mechanism as well. And we are constantly adjusting the ranking mechanisms. And there's a lot of more we could do to the ranking system than what we do today. But we need user input on that.
Thank you.
Barbara?
So thank you very much, Øystein, for uptaking this huge, endeavor, and thank you to Norway to host this. This is a lot of people, resources, and petabytes of data, right? So talking about legacy, this is a great legacy that YOPP built that wasn't built, I think, in IPY as strong. How long is going to be this legacy, and how WWRP can help Norway to make sure that this legacy is built on and continued in pickup?
We have no intentions of shutting down anything here. So that's the first thing. So as long as it's used, there is a user community. Just a couple of days ago, we had a discussion on a dataset we generated for ESA on polar lows, for example. And we discussed, should we shut it down or not? But then we saw the user base of it. If it's used by users, it's relevant, then we continue to support it. And it's the same with this. If it's used, it's relevant, and then we will continue to support it. Of course, there is a cost included in this, but in a distributed model, that is a shared cost. So it's normally easier to handle. And it's specifically for the YOPP sitemap part, that's not an issue. So that we will be able to handle anyway. So.
Thank you very much again.
Great. All right. Thanks, Øystein. Time to move on. So Jon Christensen is going to